All right, let's talk about Rome Odunze, who was a top 10 pick in the draft last year. And some people said, is that the right move for the Bears going after a wide receiver? However, it was largely still praised at the time, largely because people just liked Odunze as a player. You're getting a good player. Who cares if maybe you could use an offensive lineman more? However, after year one, 734 yards, 3 touchdowns, not horrible, but not what they were expecting right away. So let's talk about his play and where he can maybe go moving forward. So let's first start off with some positives. We did definitely see some positives with Odunze, like this play. It's going to be just a screen pass. He is the one who I have circled in white, and this is something that you could definitely look at as a play that maybe Ben Johnson will try to utilize with Odunze. Watch how when this begins, you see first he cuts very well to just, fake as though he's maybe going out to run a route, but getting back quickly, being in position to catch the screen pass. Again, nothing fancy, but doing his job here. And then is able to turn well, even with some contact, moves forward, and picks up a first down. Again, nothing crazy, but these little things are things that Odunze does well, quite frankly. So, yes, there are some positives, and you do think in a Ben Johnson scheme, could we see more of these positives emerge? I certainly think it's possible. Like, this plays another example of the positives that we did see last year. I actually thought this was something, maybe his biggest positive of last year was, I thought he did really good on these types of plays. So first, let's just explain what the play is. It's a zone coverage concept, and you see he's going to try and get into a gap in coverage. Watch how when this play begins, you're going to see him run this route well. Again, it's nothing fancy right here, but he's doing his job, and he's gotten in position to where, he's paying attention to where everyone is around him, knows where the gap is, and is sitting there. Williams is going to make the throw to Odunze, who makes the grab and does some nice work in open space as well, picks up even more yards. Really, I thought he did a great job at identifying where the gaps in coverage were and finding ways to get in position to make the grab. I thought he did a very good job on this play of doing exactly that. So these are the real positives. And again, in the Ben Johnson scheme, you have to imagine that's going to be even more important. However, let's talk about the negatives. Because again, it's, there were some positives. This was not a horrible season, but you were expecting a bit more out of him when they drafted him. And I think one of the biggest disappointments with him year one was that you see this concept right here. It's just a man coverage play with a one-on-one matchup on the outside. And the draft process is always interesting because usually this type of route is what people are hoping they can get out of a wide receiver if they're drafting them early on. Just the simple one-on-one downfield shot against man coverage. I think about Jamar Chase's rookie season when he was so good at this that teams essentially just couldn't afford to, no matter what their corner was in that situation, they just couldn't afford to leave him one-on-one on an island like that. But you see here with Odunze, right when this play begins, you're going to see that the corner does a good job at staying over the top of him right here. So at this point for Chicago, what do? I mean, you could try and throw up a jump ball if you want to. Caleb Williams is not going to do that. In fact, he's currently losing the football right now, which isn't ideal. But you see, I mean, Odunze just wasn't really open and wasn't getting open consistently at all in those situations, which is disappointing because I think in college, this is one of the things he really excelled at. And part of why the Bears drafted him was so that he could succeed in these moments. And the fact that he wasn't able to was definitely disappointing. And like this is another one. It's not just those downfield opportunities. Really, it's just one-on-one matchups in general, which I can say something that I'm sure Bears fans will bring up, and rightfully so, is that there was a lot of plays where it felt like the offensive scheme was, hey, just go win. Here's a slant. Just win on this slant route. We're not doing a lot to help you. We're not having setup routes to clear things out for you. It's very simple, which is something you sometimes want to do when you have a great receiving core. Like I brought up Cincinnati earlier. That's a lot of times what they'll do just because their receivers can win so consistently. But, sometimes with younger players, you might want to make things a little easier. But that's not what Chicago's going to do here. So let's see if Odunze can win. Well, when this play begins, you see that again, some contact slows him down a little bit, and he's just not open right here. It would be a really tight window, and really he'd have to make a great catch. On top of it, this is the robber concept that the Vikings are in, meaning a safety is covering right on the Vikings logo right here. When Caleb Williams decides to make this throw, that probably should have been intercepted. And it's not all Odunze's fault for that. Williams should have not made that throw. He should have read the robber concept. But even if the safety wasn't there, Odunze just wasn't open, and that was kind of one of the issues, is he just wasn't able to win those one-on-ones consistently enough. But a play like this might be what you look towards if you're a Bears fan of what could potentially be a sign of things to come. So this is a man coverage concept right here. Man coverage across the board, and it's going to be a blitz. That is where Odunze is. And you notice there is kind of a lot of traffic around, like which defender is supposed to cover which wide receiver. They're going to switch out the line, and quite frankly, that's going to create a little bit of confusion defensively. Watch how, when Odunze just goes down the field, he just gets way by the Vikings player who's trying to cover him. Again, this was not just because he's so much better he was able to blow by the defender. There was some communication issues which allowed this to happen. But you know who's great at generating communication issues? Ben Johnson. At least he was in Detroit, and you assume he will be that in Chicago. And perhaps just giving Odunze more favorable matchups, he can take advantage like what he's doing right here. Again, the ball isn't going to go in his direction, which is unfortunate for him, but still a very, good play there by both Odunze, by Odunze. Not a great play by the Vikings there, but still, that's maybe a sign of what could happen. If you can give him some favorable matchups, could you see things like this happening more, him getting open more? I think it's possible. So yeah, I mean, what do we do from here? Where do we go from here with Rome Odunze, a player that, again, I think showed some nice things. I don't think that this was a complete disastrous rookie year or anything like that. This was not a Kadarius Toney where after 1 year we're like, well, this doesn't look like it's going to work out. Like, no, I certainly think this could work out. I do think that with the Ben Johnson scheme, you look at it and usually it values more footwork and shiftiness and things of that nature. Something that Odunze isn't necessarily as known for. He's kind of considered more of a outside jump ball receiver type. But ultimately, you can still use those positive traits in a Ben Johnson offense, right? And I do think that he has enough traits to work in the Ben Johnson offense. I do think that he is relatively shifty, like we saw with that screenplay I showed you earlier. And again, you get him in a situation where maybe he can be schemed up a step. He doesn't have to be schemed completely open. Maybe you can just scheme him a bit of an easier matchup, in a bit of an advantage. Maybe even just like a rub route to let him get a little bit more open. Something like that. I do think he can capitalize on it potentially if he's given those types of situations. So that's ultimately what we'll have to wait and see. But as a whole, I think there's definitely potential for him to become the number one receiver that we thought he might be when he got drafted. But yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on all of this. I'll just mention real quick before I go, I do have a movie channel. If you want to hear my thoughts on movies, you can check that out. Link is in the description below for that, if it seems like your kind of thing. But yeah, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from y'all. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.